Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
On today's Your Take, I talk to a woman who wears many hats. My guest is a stand-up comedian, an actress, a coach, and runs her own comedy club. My guest has performed at the Edinburgh Festival and Glastonbury and received glowing praise from fellow comedian Phil Jupitus. She's an award-winning trainer and professional coach, teaching presentation skills to CEOs and staff. She also runs comedy courses, teaching students skills to build their confidence, learn comedic writing devices, and using comedy as a therapy for people's well-being and mental health. My guest has a master's diploma in Humanistic Psychology for Facilitation, Leadership and Coaching. She also runs her own comedy club called Aftermirth, which caters for parents with babies. On today's Your Take, I talk to Angie Belcher. We discuss Angie's love of comedy and performing live on stage, her work as a professional coach, lecturer, and motivational speaker, being a mum, and her aims and ambitions for the future. A very warm welcome and good afternoon, and welcome to Your Take.
Hello, that was quite a comprehensive list, wasn't it? That's a lot of stuff.
Obviously, like you say, we've got quite a lot of ground and areas to discuss and cover in today's discussion. But I always like to do the obvious, kind of go back to the kind of very beginnings. I kind of like to delve into your kind of early life, your roots, where you were born, where you're from. And I wanted to start off by simply asking you where and when you were born and what are your recollections from childhood? And then secondly, I wanted to ask, do you have siblings? And can you tell me who your parents are and what they did for a living?
Wow, it's very therapeutic, isn't it? I'm going to feel like I'm with my psychoanalyst now. I don't have a psychoanalyst, I can't afford one. I have a counsellor, which is like the cheap version of a psychoanalyst.
I'm an unqualified one. I will explain that.
Good, all right then, great. I won't share too much then. I come from a place called Wednesbury in the West Midlands. It was then the second most deprived area in the UK. I come from a council house in the middle of nowhere, which is on the edge of a town, which is on the edge of another town. So it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, really. I grew up kind of not having much to do, really. There wasn't a lot for young people to do around there, and I found solace in the church, to be honest with you. The church kind of really saved me, I think, living in a place whereby most of the people I knew kind of were doing drugs and or getting in trouble with the law. I think it was kind of a bit of a saving grace. It was the only place that existed, really, that did stuff with young people. And so I went to church and I became heavily involved in the Guiding Association, which was great. And I think where I got my love of facilitation from, actually, is the Guiding Association, because I used to work with brownies on a Thursday. So when I was like 13, 14 years old, I was out working with teaching brownies games. And I've always had a love of games. And I think it came from that. I was also a Sunday school teacher, which is really weird because now I have no faith whatsoever. And yet, I went to Sunday school every Sunday and church youth club every Sunday night. Tuesday night was guides. Thursday night was looking after the brownies. So I think most of my life was actually within the Methodist Church. And I look back now and I think it was great because I was doing things that my parents wouldn't have been able to afford to do with me, such as going kayaking and canoeing and gorge walking and coast steering and doing loads of fun stuff and going away for the weekend. And I think it gave me, a steady hand in those years, and it kind of gave me another family, really, that kind of, kind of gave me a different way of working. And we're inspirational people there, really, because it was kind of quite a tough neighbourhood, I'd say. There wasn't a lot of inspiration or aspiration at my school. And I recently had a chat with someone who was a teacher there not that long ago, who talked about this awful school that she worked at, where she got hit by a pupil. And then I found out quite recently that it was my school that I went to. It wasn't a great school. However, something that happened at school that I think was quite life-changing for me, and again, recently, I kind of came back into contact with this person. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a project called Serious About Comedy, where I did a tour in Birmingham, and it was about how they wanted to become a city of comedy. And looking at what I do, which is comedy on referral, which uses a process of learning stand-up comedy to help people recover from trauma. And somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, Angie, I really liked your presentation." And we got chatting, and I worked out that she was someone who came to my school when I was about 12 years old and brought a professional theatre company there. We put on a big production, like a community play. So it's like professionals and school kids and people in the community. We put on this really big play. It was really, they had a lot of money, and I got to act in it and sing. And it was a really pivotal point in my life, really, that I kind of loved it so much that I remember thinking to myself, wow, I want to perform for a living. I loved it so much. Because again, my parents would never have taken me to the theatre. It wasn't really in their cultural cachet to do that kind of thing. Theatre's expensive. We didn't have a car either. How would you get there? So for a theatre company to come to your school and kind of put on a play and then say, "Oh, well, you can get involved too." It was a company called Jubilee. And they really changed my life, and I reconnected with them recently because we didn't know who each other was, because we obviously got a little bit older. And so that's my background. I think that's where I came from. My dad died when I was 18, and therefore left some money, so I was able to go to university. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it meant that I could go off and afford to live away from home. And so I moved from the Midlands to Bristol. I did my degree at Ewing.
Yeah, I was interesting. You've kind of given us quite a long portrait of your background, and you've touched upon your education, which I'm going to kind of come on to in a minute. You've mentioned losing your dad at a very young age, but I wanted to ask you about your mum. Is she still alive, and what did she do in terms of her work?
Right. My mum died last year, and so my mum was a dinner lady when I was really young. When I was older, she went back to working in a factory, and that's how my parents had met. So both my parents worked in a factory doing what you call unskilled labour, really. My mum worked on something called the carousel, which was this big machine that you came round and you put a pivot in something, then you put a pivot in. They did that, and you did that every day for 30 years. That's what my mum did. It was very repetitive, boring work. I think they enjoyed the factory floor there. There was, whenever I went there to the factory to visit them, it was a place called Walsall Conduits in Hilltop in West Bromwich. Whenever I went in there seemed to be a camaraderie there on the factory floor. I got that feeling that, it was a fun place to be. My parents worked there their whole lives, really. They got up at 5 a.m, they got home at 4:30. And and that's what they did. And my dad said to me that I could do anything apart from work in a factory, which I think is understandable, really. Now I've got my own child, it's like you kind of you don't want them to do the kind of things that you've hated, I suppose, in your work life. But my parents, they didn't have a love for their work, I don't think, at all. It was something that they did to earn money.
From coming from this working class background, I wanted to come on to schooling, and you've touched on it briefly. I wanted to kind of ask where you were schooled, and would you describe yourself as a natural academic? And did you have sort of early career ambitions? And I kind of then wanted to talk about your time at university and what that kind of taught you about life and kind of changing as a person. What did that sort of university experience bring into your life at the time?
So yes, what was the first question? I've forgotten the first one. At school,
sorry, too many questions.
What was school like?
Yeah,
I loved academia. Actually, I loved learning. I loved learning. I really liked it. However, I was heavily bullied at school, probably because this is me, and that kind of old Hogwarts thing, isn't it? The Harry Potter thing, and everyone always thinks, oh, there's a family somewhere that's missing a stage acting child. You know what I mean? And we've been swapped at birth. I had a real love of performing. I absolutely love performing. I can remember definitely. My mind has never changed since I was about 7 years old, that I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to perform. It's never changed. I've never lost my love for it. And So being all jazz handy, and I was the only child in the adult theatre company that was attached to my school, run by this amazing teacher called Kim Pickford, who we were on the first name terms with because we kind of went to drama club and everything, which was like so cool to call her Kim, but you can only do it when, you know, no one was looking. You could say, hi, Kim. So I loved that. So to be with all these adults in a theatre company, and that was my saving grace, and I really, really loved that. That's what I look forward to, really, was performing and putting on shows. But my day-to-day was pretty hard. I was bullied a lot. I was physically bullied, you know what I mean? Really, I've still got a scar from where someone punched me in the face with do you remember those old rings that you used to get that were like pennies? It was really cool to have, like,
yeah.
they were made out of pennies. You could get them from H. Samuels or something like that. Yeah, and I can still have a rivet in my face from where I got punched so hard. So it was just horrible, really. I was quite depressed as a child because of that. I think I was kind of very anxious about school. These days, I think I would have been taken out of school maybe, or something, you know, do some home learning, I don't know. And then I went off to do my A-levels at Chance Campus in Smethwick, which was great. I was the only white girl in the class because Smethwick is quite an Asian place, but also because white girls tended not to go and do A-levels. They tended to go and become nursery nurses or hairdressers in the place where I was. And I fell in love with Asian culture. I remember you've got like something that you love, a food stuff that you love, and you can remember the first time you had it and how you felt. I can remember being in an Indian sweet shop in Smethwick, having my first ever samosa, and me loving it, and also being in a world of pain. So I went off and did 4 A-levels in Smethwick, which I really enjoyed, because all the girls I was with didn't punch me in the face, which was quite important for learning. And B, I really it was being in a classroom whereby there was aspiration, and that's why, you know, people talk about aspiration being so important. But when you're with other people who are like, yeah, we're going to learn. Oh, we love this, and oh, we love learning. They really wanted to be there and to learn, and that's the difference between how well you do. I think sometimes is if you find your tribe. You know, people like Ken Robinson talk about find your tribe, and when I got to do A-levels, I think I found a tribe of girls who loved learning, and it makes the difference.
And I wanted to kind of move on and talk about your time at university, what you studied and what you kind of also learned from that experience, because obviously moving away from home, past as new, was that kind of a positive experience for you, particularly when you were so unhappy at school?
I think so. I think I found it all a bit scary, because being that kind of I think the weight of your class can sometimes hang around your neck. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think I was very aware that I kind of was with. I remember going to a flat. So they put you in a flat, and there was every type of class there. So there was me, there was a middle class girl, there was an upper middle class girl, and there was like a member of the royal family, all within this flat. And I look back now and it's really interesting, because it's a bit like that, the old Monty Python sketch. But the person who was the member of like royalty, who kind of like come from Dubai, who had loads of money, brought nothing with her but a very large bag of substance that maybe some people would have. I don't know whether I can mention drugs on this program. I don't know what I'm doing here with that. A very large bag of a substance you shouldn't have. The upper middle class person didn't have many things. The middle class person just had enough plates for herself and a saucepan for herself. And the working class person had enough everything for everyone to use. So I had like 6 plates, 6 knives and forks, 6 cups. And it's really interesting, the difference in how we approach kind of like living together. You'd have thought it'd be the opposite way around, that person would have had the most, but no, they didn't need to, because someone else will sort it out, you know. Whereas I went there, my mom had given me enough stuff to feed a small family, you know what I mean? And she would come up once a month on the train with a bag of quick save shopping. And I always also remember that at university that no one could understand a word my mom said. And it was once mooted that she should come with subtitles, because they just didn't understand, because my mom had a really thick black country accent, and like me, talked really fast and was really excited. I always remember the first thing she said to my friends when she came in to visit me in the flat I was in Clifton, which is for those who don't know, a really posh bit of Bristol. I remember her going, right, hello, I'm Brenda, Angie's mum. Now who's got the crack? It's like my mum didn't even know what crack was. I didn't think. I was like, bloody hell, it blew my mind. But yeah, she died. My mum died last year from cancer. And so, yeah, it's not even been a year yet. So it's really harsh. And I talk about my mum a lot in my stand-up. So, and that's been really difficult. I've had to take things out, you know what I mean, and put them into past tense. And that was a really horrible experience. Yeah, so that takes us up to university. Is that the kind of answer you wanted?
Yeah, some memorable, some lovely stories there about your time there. And of course, I want to talk about your love for performance. You've mentioned already your love for the stage and to perform to an audience. But I wanted to ask you, what initially got you interested in stand-up comedy? And at what age did you start performing in front of a live audience?
So I can trace back my love of live comedy to watching Lenny Henry on the telly when I was growing up. So Lenny Henry came from Dudley, which is just down the road from West Bromwich. And so to hear someone who sounded like me and who'd come from a working class upbringing, being on the telly, winning loads of awards, you know, winning the New Faces competition and doing stand-up. And even though he talked about very different things, obviously he talked about race and I, you know, I was a white girl, but I kind of my struggle I saw mirrored in Lenny Henry's struggle. And I've never met him really. I always want to tell him it was really important to me kind of choosing comedy. But then while I was at university, I didn't do anything. I think I drank a lot of alcohol and I partied a lot, but I didn't do any acting or anything. And looking back, I think a lot of that was to do with my confidence. Kind of, I didn't feel like I could walk into the drama department and kind of go, hey, I want to join the Amdram company here or whatever. It never felt, I didn't feel confident enough to do that. And so what I did was after I left university, I did lots of Amdram stuff, and I started a sketch show that we performed in several different places around Bristol. And I really I still love writing and performing in a group. It's really nice as a stand-up, because you don't get to do that very often. But I really enjoyed it. However, people didn't want to take it anywhere. And I thought what we had with our sketch group was so good. And I wanted to take it Edinburgh. And the people that was with didn't want to do that. And so then I suddenly started thinking that stand-up would be good. Because I suddenly started thinking, oh, with stand-up, you're completely in control of what you do, where you go, what you write, how you perform. It felt like a really kind of like the freelancer option of the performing arts, I suppose, that you kind of got to, you know, be in control of it. And I thought, well, let's just take everything I've learned from sketch and writing comedy in that way and put it into stand-up. And so I remember thinking, this is a weird thing about, are you ever too old to do anything? So I would have been about, I don't know, so I was doing sketching late 20s and didn't do stand-up till I was about 31. And so I can remember thinking I'd left it too late. I remember thinking, oh, I can't do this because I've left it too late in life. I was supposed to be doing this when I was 21, not 31. I've left it too late. There's no point trying, which is really interesting, because I can remember somebody recently who was about 25 saying, oh, I want to start out, but I've left it too late. And it's like, it's never too late.
From the introduction, we established that you've done so many different things in your career. And obviously we're going to illustrate and talk about that in the interview. You've spoken about your upbringing, you've spoken about your educational years, but I kind of wanted to ask you, before you started working as a comedian, a coach, a public speaker, a facilitator, events organization, the list goes on, I wanted to find out how you've kind of paved a career in these areas. And I wanted to ask you what jobs you've done previously, and was there always this burning desire to work in a creative or teaching role?
So the jobs I had, so when I left university, I spent about 4 or 5 years in homelessness, and I worked in hostels. I was a homelessness officer in Swindon. That was mostly working with people who got teenage pregnancies, because then it was like the teenage pregnancy capital of the of the country in Swindon.
What
And
sort of era was this, Angie?
so this would have been early 20s. Yeah, early 20s.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I worked in housing. I don't know why. I don't know. I think I was going to be a social worker. Yeah. So the plan in terms of the day job was to be a social worker. But so I was getting experience because I wanted to go and do social work. And then jobs wise, I then went, first after university, I did spend a year in a call centre, which was so horrible. I remember hating it so much. I used to live in Knoll, and there's a big main road there, Wells Road. And I can remember getting up every day and thinking, oh, if I just got run over, not kill myself, but just got run over and I broke my leg, then I'd probably have a couple of weeks off work, wouldn't I? So I hated my job so much. I was wishing myself an injury, potentially killing myself just because I hated it so much. And I think the reason is because you had to sell. It was working for BT, selling things. And I never had any awards or won any of those group things because I used to think, oh, you don't really need this. Whereas some people would sell things to grannies and stuff. It was just horrible. They knew they didn't need call minder or call waiting, but you got a yes. It was big bucks then. You could earn more in commission a month than your wages if you were a good seller, and I was rubbish at it. So I went off to work in homelessness. And then I got a job working for a youth development charity called Fairbridge, who are amazing, a bit like the Prince's Trust, but more outdoor pursuitsy. And I loved that. That was working with disaffected, disadvantaged and vulnerable young people, which I absolutely love. But I just kind of grew out of it and wanted another challenge. So then I became creative manager of a company called Art and Power. Mm-hmm. And they were a disability arts organisation. So that was working to empower people with disabilities and mental health issues through the arts. So it was about kind of seeing people as artists and actors and writers first, rather than disabled people, and empowering them to create their own opportunities and get paid work and enhance their careers. So I think that's the reason why when people kind of say, why did you start comedy on referral, which, uses comedy for people going through trauma? I think it's because my background has always been in kind of, again, come back to that thing that I told you about at my school. We had no aspiration. Nobody ever said to me, oh, did you know you could become a writer? Did you know you could become an actor? Nobody ever said that to me, because at my school, it was like, we had one careers lesson the once that lasted about half an hour. And then it was like, which factory do you want to go to, or which hairdressers? Because that's all there was. That's all that was seen for us to do. Nobody ever mentioned university. That was only because my dad said, why don't you go to university? But I wasn't allowed to do acting because my parents didn't see the point of it. So, yeah, I think helping people think future forward on their issues and what they want to be and how they want to be in the world. So I quite like coaching rather than counselling, because counselling is about looking back, isn't it? But coaching is about kind of where you want to go forward. And so I took my coaching qualification because I really wanted to help people. And then Art and Power was a lovely job. I absolutely loved it. It was mostly working with people with learning difficulties who are just amazing, just so funny. They're hilarious. I used to laugh every single day. We used to have directors want to come and work with us, and our ethos was that if they're working with our people with learning difficulties, and they should choose who the director is. And so we'd set up a way that they could interview and understand the questions. And I always remember this one funny day where we had someone coming in to interview, and there was about 10 of us interviewing them because they all wanted to be involved, so we let them. And there's this one woman with learning difficulties who always made me laugh. And one of her questions was, for the potential theatre director, was, I really like your eyeshadow. Where did you buy it? And it was like, that's not really a question to ask a potential theatre director. It's got nothing to do with it. But it's just those little kind of, they're just, because they kind of have no filter when you have a learning difficulty, in the same way, or it's like neurodiversity. If you're neurodiverse, you often don't have the same filter. And I think it gives you lots of opportunities for comedy because of that. I really enjoyed it.
Interesting. And I echo your sentiment about call centres. I did a similar job to yours many years ago, and it's probably the most difficult and most, I don't know, stressful, but I didn't have the necessary skills to sell things over the phone. It wasn't for me. But it's interesting, this background, working with kind of people in society who I guess are vulnerable to some degree, or being let down by the system, or are struggling, and to help others. I wanted to kind of come on and talk about where did this idea come from to launch your own comedy courses? And how did you go about making that concept an actual reality?
Do you mean the comedy on referral courses, James?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I was teaching and lecturing, so I lecture in a few universities. I lecture in stand-up, which I really loved. In the pandemic, I lectured in sitcom and sketch writing at the University of Worcester. I'm head of the stand-up module at Comedian. I was doing lots of corporate lecturing, do open access, learn to do comedy in a day, 5 minutes kind of thing. And it was really, really nice. But I noticed that the people who came on my courses, I mean, they had amazing transformations. They just come off stage and they just look taller and they look more confident. And I think stand-up gives you that kind of, it's hard work, but when you come off stage, you know, and you've had a good gig, yeah, it's a great high, it's a natural high, I suppose. And I suddenly started thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we did this in the community, if we did it with people who've got real problems, as in, like, you know, mental health issues and recovering from PTSD or postnatal depression or anxiety. What if we took them through the process? Because it might not be in their cultural cachet. It might be that they don't have the money to. I mean, it's expensive to go on a course, isn't it? And I suddenly started thinking, wouldn't it be great to do this in a therapeutic fashion? And so I applied to the Arts Council last year for some money. It was the Developing Your Creative Practice money. And it's the first time that the Arts Council have released money that was about helping your career. And so the question really was, what would you want to do to enhance your career right now? And I was like, I really want to find out, does the process of learning stand-up comedy help you recover or help you look at your issues in a different way? Does it add to your well-being? Is there a scientific way that I can find out if this works? So I thought, I'll apply for some money to do a pilot and find out. So we did that in January, and turns out, yes, it does help. The feedback that I had was, I had quantitative feedback, and the qualitative feedback was amazing. It was people saying that most importantly, that they felt better. That was the whole point of doing it. It seems like such a simple sentence, doesn't it? I felt better. But that was the moment when I went, oh, yes, it does work. Somebody feels better because of learning stand-up comedy. That's great. Because I was up for scrutiny, you know. I mean, people like the Daily Mail said horrible things about it. And I was like, bring it on. I'm doing this to find out. And if it turns out that it doesn't work, that's fine. I'll go and do something else. But I want there to be scrutiny on this. And people said just amazing things, that they wanted to push for a better life. You know, one of them asked one of the other people out on a date on the last day. I mean, I don't know how to put that into some sort of qualitative feedback, but you know what I mean? They felt so good about themselves that they'd throw it up to somebody and ask them out on a date, like in the middle of the session. It was great. So yeah, was that the right answer?
Using comedy as a therapeutic tool is really interesting, and I kind of want to pick up on this, and I kind of want to ask you, the people that you teach on this courses, how would you kind of describe them, like their backgrounds? What do they do in terms of their work? What are they looking to kind of get out of the course and the learning? And kind of second to that, you said you had kind of a backlash from the media and sort of skeptics. Do you sometimes think that as a society that we're too serious, and that even post the pandemic, that life is almost too fast for some people, too stressful, and maybe we should take a backward kind of assessment and step away and actually look at some of the most enjoyable things in life and the most funny things we see in life?
The kind of people, your first question was that, yeah, who came on it, and that there were people who are under. So how it gets referred to is by the social prescription team. So how they work is you go to your doctor and they say, here's some pills. They can also kind of go, right, I'm going to refer you to a social prescription team, who then can prescribe things other than tablets, like belly dancing or a gym membership or art therapy. And one of the things that they can refer to now is stand-up comedy. So this course. So the people that came on the course had serious mental health problems. All sorts of different things that you can think of they had, and they did they did have trauma. I know it sounds a bit nuts because that's what I wanted to do. But when I first sat in that group and I looked around, I was like, oh gosh, there is, just by looking at people, you could tell that they were going through some stuff. And they had done. And I can remember thinking, gosh, I hope this works. Because if not, I don't want to re-traumatize people, you know what I mean? Don't make them any worse. Your second question, what was your second question, James? Sorry.
Yeah, my second question was, do you kind of feel as a society in this country that,
oh yeah,
you know, that we kind of take life very, very seriously? It's very fast paced. Obviously, you know, we live in capitalist consumer society. And do you think some people just struggle with that, and sometimes we just need to take a backward step and, you know, think
I see how I see it is that the comedy is an important part of our emotional landscape. Yeah, we have moments in our lives when we have serious moments, we have moments that are weird, we have moments that are sad, we have moments that are happy. We see comedy as somehow being lowbrow, that comedy isn't an important art form. That comedies, like, you know, as comedians, and my fellow comedians will tell you the amount of times that people even today who've asked me to work for free. And the irony of this is that most people, when they look at their fears, you know what I mean, their top 10 fears, 80% of people have public speaking, and particularly stand-up comedy, which is sort of the ultimate public speaking, in their list of things that would absolutely terrify them. And yet we see stand-up comedy as somehow being a lower art form. And yet comedy, for me, it's clever, it's educational, it's interactive. You learn so much from stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy isn't just about telling jokes. The best stand-up comedians are the ones that when you leave the room, you kind of go, wow, I'm going to do something different because I've just learned about this, or I didn't realize that about sexuality or race or identity or politics or whatever it is that you bring to the stage that is your thing that you want to talk about. You can change people's minds about stuff. You can kind of make people think, oh, I didn't think about it in that way anymore. And I also think a lot of life is quite serious and it's hard. So if you are given the opportunity to have fun or to go, wow, that funny thing happened, why would you not take that respite in a harsh world? You know, we live in a harsh world. There's wars happening. People are dying right now. It's terrible. There's still people who haven't got access to fresh water. It's really serious. And I'm not saying that if you take a moment to be comedic about something, it doesn't take from the gravitas and the importance and the seriousness of something. It's just another emotion that is important. And it can have so many great, it breaks down barriers, you know, like the project I'm about to do in Northwest London, working with men at risk of suicide. The idea is being that through comedy, you can access a seriousness. So you could go into a room and kind of go, right, let's talk about our serious innermost thoughts. Or you can kind of go, let's have some fun. And by having fun with it, you actually relax people enough to then bring out the serious stuff. Comedy is a way to access our really innermost dark thoughts. Look at some of the most famous comedians, you know, who they've looked at really dirty, kind of lowbrow. So Bill Hicks has some right dirty stuff that he used to say on stage, really lowbrow, kind of like, you know, goat boy and all that kind of stuff, which was a very sexual comedy. And yet he also did amazing things about politics, about the telling the truth, which we still to this day want our stand-up comedians to do. We want our stand-up comedians to kind of go, this is what's really going on. And so comedy has such an important part to play in society. And I wanted to make sure that anyone could access that, not just people with money who are middle class, but anyone could. And because that's what my background is that when that play came to my school and I was able to perform with professional actors and put on a big production, it changed my life. Everyone should have access to the arts.
I want to tap into comedy because of all the art forms, it seems to me to be one of the hardest skills or attributes to have. Like, you stood alone on a stage in front of an audience, and surely to make people laugh must be extremely hard. It must be daunting and at the same time very nerve-wracking. I wanted to kind of ask you how you go about writing comedy material and sketches, and where do your stories, your humor and your observations come from? Are they kind of based as well around real life experiences?
I think the way that I write comedy is I just observe life, and then things happen that I think, oh, that's quite funny, and I'll normally text it to myself. So normally you'll see me at some point go, can I have that? Is that yours? Or have you said that? Or is that off the telly? Because you have to be so careful sometimes when you say something, you have to just check that it's not stolen from some other comedians. I'll go, is that yours? Did you come up with that funny thing that you just said? And I go, yeah, I go, lovely. I text it to myself. And then what happens is sometimes my friends will go, oh, she'll want to text that. She'll want to send that to herself because it's really funny. And I'm thinking, it wasn't that funny, but I'll pretend to text it anyway, so that I don't upset my friends. Because sometimes I'm like, no, it's not funny. It's not funny. It's not going to work. And also, it's hard as a comedian, kind of working out what is funny because it's completely contextual, and which you can refer to the stage. So that's kind of how I work. And then I would edit material and kind of put it into some sort of plan. And write new stuff. So sometimes I'll have a new audience. Like the other week, I had an audience of doctors and nurses, and so I wrote a few new things about my experiences with medical professionals, because it kind of felt like that was the right audience for that kind of material. How I teach other people to write is I first of all work on who they are and what they're about. So very much working on their comedic persona. And in order to find out what your comedic persona is on the stage, you have to find out who you are off the stage. So I have this model that I've come up with whereby we look at what your struggle is and what you want your message in the world to be.
Interestingly, comedies come in the spotlight recently in terms of being documented on the television, in the news, with regard to some comedians speaking out about how difficult it is to perform an act now, living in a society where we have to be maybe a bit more careful about the things we say and the things we do, and kind of think about our actions. Do you find that difficult as a comedian, that sometimes maybe you're writing a sketch or you're performing a gag on stage and you think, should I really be saying that? The consequences of what I say might be, maybe I'd be ridiculed for this. What's kind of your standpoint on being able to make fun of people or create laughter out of maybe a difficult situation, or
Yeah, I've got you. Well, I think it's good that we have to put some consciousness into it. I think this idea that you can just say whatever you want, and if people have got a problem with it, it's their problem. As a society, we're growing kinder and nicer. Every society does a little bit, I think. Doesn't mean that there's not bad things that happen, but as a society, we do move forward. We get to a point where we kind of go, oh, actually, we used to say that you could hit your wife if it was only a thin branch. Should we change that? Oh yeah, I think we better. All right then. Oh, you can hit children. Oh, actually, should we hit children? Let's say we can't hit children. Society gets kinder and more civilized, and therefore your art mirrors life. And so yes, your art should have consciousness to it. I think people who say you should be able to say anything, actually, yeah, you can say everything, but whether you should, and we live in the UK, you can kind of say whatever you want on stage. There are some countries I know whereby you can't. The police will literally say you can't say that. We're taking you in and putting you into prison. But I think there has to be some consciousness into it. You have to be able to think, is this kind? Is it warranted? And as a comedian, I think we are in a privileged position, and it's a powerful position. I would say to people, stand-up is really powerful. It's more powerful. I would say it's more poetic than poetry, and it's more theatrical than theatre. Because stand-up is one person on a stage, so really feel powerful place to be in. And therefore, I think you should put consciousness into it. You should be thinking, if I say this, as some people, are the traveller community going to get spat on down the road because of something I've said? For example, as someone recently, said some nasty stuff about travellers. I personally wouldn't stand on a stage thinking, if because of something I've said, someone's going to get spat on. I would feel personally bad about that. Some other comedians don't, but if you're asking me personally, yes, you should put consciousness into it. So you've got to get it right all the time. And I'm not saying I have got it right all the time. However, I think if you're thinking, right, how can I really upset people and get them spat upon by other people? But, how can I punch down and really make the people at the bottom have an even tougher life? That's not the kind of comedy that I'm going to perform. And I don't think anyone else should. I think we should be held to account for the things that we say in a public sphere.
I want to talk about some of the highlights in your life and career, from performing and being involved in the Glastonbury Festival as a performer and a compère with the festival's Cabaret Tent. your show, Mythical Creature, which won critical acclaim when it was performed at the Edinburgh Festival, gaining a third place in What the Frog's Best UK Comedy Newcomer competition back in 2015. And you also received high praise from the comedian Phil Jupitus. I kind of wanted you to sum up, some of your highlights from some of those shows and performances that I've mentioned. And are there any kind of fond memories or particular moments that stand out for you?
Glastonbury is fun, but it's hard work. And the reason why it's hard work is that I worked as the compère. I did do a bit on my own once because someone dropped out, but I was there as the compère. And the thing is, in a festival show, no one's ever there to see the compère. Yeah, they're waiting for Lee Nelson to come on, who's running 10 minutes late. So I've got to keep talking for 10 minutes in front of an audience that ain't my audience because they're waiting for Lee Nelson. And as you can imagine, my audience is very different from Lee Nelson's audience. Yeah. And so Lee Nelson's audience, they're like, where the hell, they said, the hell is Lee Nelson? But using slightly juicier language, shall we say? You know what I mean? So you've got to keep going because you can't leave an empty stage at a festival. You know what I mean? A dead stage is really bad.
Is there a moment there where you're thinking, I wish somebody would just pull on a rope and open a trap door and I could just disappear?
Exactly, but you've got to stay. You can't have a dead stage. Festivals, you have to look like the tent is constantly going. It's a 6,000 person tent. So it's a big old tent late at night. So it's hard work. I think you earn your money in those kind of events. You know what I mean? I've done gigs where everything I say is lovely and nice and happy. I had a great gig this week in Bristol at Lost Horizon, supporting Grace Campbell. And again, it wasn't my audience. It was Grace Campbell's audience, who are a lot younger than me. And I went on going, oh, they're going to hate me. But luckily, I don't know what happened. I managed to make it click and I killed it in the end. But it's kind of that awareness of like, these are very young, sexy young girls, you know what I mean? They're going to hate me. And luckily I turned it around. I don't know how. I think it's because I went on and I was just really super miserable because all the other acts were all a bit jazz hands. And when you go on, you want to do a different energy to the other comedians so that it makes people go, oh, this is different. So to answer your question, yeah, comparing sometimes can be a hard job. And Glastonbury, I must admit, yeah, it was hard, but it was also good fun. And it's nice to hang around with, lots of amazing comedians backstage and have a bit of fun. Then we won some competitions. I think 2015 was my year, really. It was a really good year for me. I was mostly headlining big winning competitions. Edinburgh, I had a great run at Edinburgh and did very well, I'd say, out of it. Had nice audiences, learnt a lot. And I'd imagine
always nice to get good critical praise from your peers as well. And somebody that's high profile and been around a long time, like Phil Jupitus, a kind of household name on our television sets, that must have been quite a big ego boost, I'd imagine, for you.
It was, yeah, because people were coming to my show because Phil had said that, which was really nice. And I went up to Phil and I was like, did you really say that about my show? And he's like, yeah, it's amazing. And I think it's because my show at Edinburgh was part stand-up and part poetry. And Phil Jupitus is a poet as well as a comedian. And so I think he really liked the mashup of comedy and poetry. But it's really nice. And I also like to make, kind of say nice things about my other comedians. I think there's a great kind of feeling that we're all in competition in comedy, but there's enough room for us all. And so I really like supporting and coaching new stand-ups.
Talking about new stand-ups or maybe names from the past, you mentioned about sort of helping and supporting one another, but are there any ones that have kind of particularly influenced you? I know you mentioned Lenny Henry in the early 80s when you first came across his work, but of new comedians and maybe some famous names of old, who would you cite as real influences for you?
I think we're talking about recent comedians. Tig Notaro is someone that's really made me think about how people put their trauma onto a stage. I mean, she's just a masterclass in how you take the most awful thing. So Tig Notaro, double breast cancer, mastectomy, mum died, she nearly died, she got cancer, just everything that happened that could happen was awful, Also her struggle with, you know, being a lesbian in the States as well, you know, that kind of stuff. And sorry, not in the States, but being gay in society in general. And I think she took that, she didn't shy away from that and kind of go, well, that's what happened. I'll go on and talk about, you know, what it's like to be in the supermarket. No, she took her trauma and put it on stage. And I think I've learned a lot from watching people like her who make it an integral part of their stand-up, is to say, it's even a point where Tig Notaro takes her top off and shows you, you know, her scars from her mastectomy. It's crazy stuff. It's like, and I use her a lot when I teach my students about how to use your trauma and to not shy away from it. Because what happens is when you show people your vulnerability, it brings them closer to you. You know, and it's like with your friends, when your friends tell you what's really, how they've had a really bad day and have a bit of a cry, you actually feel close to them. And it's the same with audiences. When you actually say, this is what's going on for me, this is how I'm feeling, it brings you close to them. And if you're more authentic with them, it makes things funnier because it's more believable. And so therefore it leads to more laughs. Telling people how awful thing is leads to more laughs. It's really weird.
Outside of your stand-up comedy work, you established your own comedy club called Aftermirth, which runs during the day and is aimed at parents with babies. When was Aftermirth set up? And can you tell us about how the event works, the comedians who've been involved, and some of the venues you've used?
So yeah, I had my baby 4 years ago, and 4.5 years ago, and so I'm a comedian, my partner's a bass player. So we had to decide whose career is going to continue and whose career was going to die. and I went, like, I'll take the days. You know, that means my career is over. I can remember being in one of those baby groups and kind of like people were upset because their fingers were getting fat, or people were upset because they couldn't fit into their jeans anymore. And it was like, Angie, and how are you? And I was like, my career is over. I spent 10 years going to do that. And people were like, oh, anyway, let's move on. You know what I mean? No one understood, because in any other job, you have a HR department, you have maternity pay, you have like, oh, we'll just put you on where you were before, which is never, you know what I mean? Because I was headlining shows. It was like, if I lose my grip on this now, that's it. It's all over.
Must be difficult for both of you as well, both doing creative jobs, because there's a buzz out of performing, isn't there? There's a buzz out of being a musician and, you know, playing to an audience, you know, and they're difficult jobs to come by, and do it as a kind of full-time profession as well, aren't they?
Yeah, completely. So it's very hard. So I said, I'll take the day and I'll just lecture and teach. And then I went, oh, I was sat there once in a church hall with my baby having a custard cream, and somebody told me that I couldn't have a cup of tea in case I dropped it. And I think inside I had a little bit of a rage moment, you know what I mean? I'm thinking, I used to go to the theatre. I used to be somebody. Why can't we just have comedy during the day? And so I started Aftermirth, which is a play on the word after birth, obviously. And we have daytime comedy clubs, same sweariness, adultness, same quality as an evening club, but it's at 11:30 in the morning, and you can bring your baby.
It's a great idea. And you still running the club to this day, even sort of post-pandemic still?
Yes, we're out in real life. We're in Bristol, Cheltenham, Exeter, Taunton, Newport, Gloucester, yeah, all over.
Away from comedy writing and teaching, I wanted to ask what your interests outside of work, and can you just kind of paint us a portrait of family life in your hometown of Bristol?
Well, I have a naughty spaniel and a naughty 4.5-year-old that keep me on my toes. I live with my partner in the cottage in St George in BS5, keeping it real. What do I do? I like doing
your 4-year-old, boy or girl?
Boy flavoured.
Yeah.
Ulysses. Yeah, I think I was still off my head on the morphine when I named him Ulysses. And interestingly, I didn't give him my last name, James, because my last name's Belcher, which people often presume is a stage name. It's not, it's my real name.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want him to have that name. So I went for the Scandinavian thing of son of Angela. So Angelson is his last name, which means son of Angela. And my partner's last name, Farrell. My hobbies, I like doing the Guardian crosswords. That's my idea of fun. Yeah.
Tough crossword, that one.
Sorry?
Tough crossword, that one, the Guardian one. Is it?
Yeah, it is a good crossword. It's one of my favourite ones. Yeah, it's very good.
Any other kind of interest? Because I know you have a love of writing. Do you spend a lot of time sort of writing comedy sketches, or do you write anything sort of outside of comedy?
Well, I've just written, so I work as comedian in residence at the University of Bristol, working on a wellbeing project. So all my work seems to be connected to wellbeing at the moment. And as part of that, I wrote the Bristol Comedy History Walk, which was a 1.5 hour walk around Bristol by 2 actors playing these characters. And so I've been writing that for the last couple of months. And we premiered it the other day. And now I'm currently working on an audio play for the university called Walking with Toddlers, which is all about the joy and the horror of walking with a small person out in the world.
Angie, we've covered so many different topics today, from laughter, your work as a stand-up comedian, running the events, which we have just spoken about, all other things as well. But now we come to that penultimate moment, the moment where we ask all your take guests the same 13 questions just to wrap up the interview and find out maybe things you like, maybe things you're not so keen on outside of your working life. You ready for this?
Okay, go.
So you don't need to think about these in any great detail. First things that maybe come into your head. Number 1, Angie Belcher, what would you say is your favorite pastime?
Oh, Netflix at the moment.
Anything in particular on that streaming service?
Other streaming services are available.
No, sorry, I meant I meant anything in particular on Netflix that you sorry.
At the moment, things kind of, I really like it, shows about when kids go missing. You know what I mean? There's a child, it's gone missing. Where is it? That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Brilliant. We'll talk about cinema next. What would you say is your favorite film and why?
Oh, I don't know about favourite, but at the moment I've just found on Facebook this amazing thing called the Daily Jaws, and Jaws is one of my favourite films.
Oh, it's a classic, isn't it? Steven Spielberg. You know, Richard Dreyfuss. I love Richard Dreyfuss. I always felt Richard Dreyfuss was a little bit underrated. A classic film. From films now to writing, I know you've got a love for writing, but who would you cite as your favourite novelist?
Oh gosh, I don't tend to read fiction so much. I'm more into factual stuff, really. So at the moment, I've been reading stuff by Gabamate. Ken Robinson is possibly one of my favourite writers, and also public speakers. And I use them a lot in my work to kind of show how, even though you can get something technically incorrect and fumble over your words and not quite be that confident, and yet if you hit the things that Ken Robinson hits in his speeches, and his books, one of those books is about finding your tribe. And I've spoken about that today. And I think that's really important, finding your tribe. So yeah, Ken Robinson, I love reading stuff by Ken Robinson. So he does stuff about creativity and education.
We've established that you've done so many things in your life. We talked obviously about the comedy. We've spoken about being a motivational speaker. We've spoken about education. But taking away all of those, if you could have had a different profession, what would it have been?
Oh, what would I have been if I hadn't become a comedian? I think I was on track to become a social worker. But I don't know if that was a choice. I don't know, it's just something that I was kind of following down that route.
We can go with social worker if you want.
Yeah, maybe I would have been a social worker. That would be great. It's a noble profession.
From a social worker in another lifetime, we now ask you, who has been your greatest inspiration in life, Angie?
I think my mum was the funniest person I knew, and not because she told jokes, because she was naturally funny. She'd always find a funny thing, a situation. She'd always find the funny in it. She would never tell a joke. She wouldn't kind of go, "Oh, do you want to know a joke?" It wasn't funny in that way. There was a natural funniness to her. She was a funny person, and she was also curious about the world. And I think comedy's just about that. It's about being curious about the world.
I thought you were going to choose your mum, and you obviously mentioned that she recently passed away. Would you say she was one of the kind of closest people in your life? And I guess you miss her very much.
Yeah, I think when you have a child as well, it makes you reanalyze the relationship that you had with your own mum, and you realize how tough it is, and also the reasons why they did some of the things they did. So yeah, yes.
You mentioned The Guardian, that you like the crossword, but do you read a newspaper? I think I know which one you're going to say. And if so, what is it?
I say, yeah, I do read The Guardian, but I tend to read it online. I must admit, these days I don't buy a physical newspaper because we're trying to save the world.
Next one, I was going to ask, are you a cook? And if so, what would you choose as your favorite food?
Yes, I love cooking. I cook almost every dinner because I'm kind of a better chef than my partner. Don't tell him. And my favorite food is South American. I love that mixture of hot and creamy together.
This next one, people always come a little bit stuck on. We ask somebody to choose their favorite cultural icon. It could maybe be a political figure, someone famous from history, maybe someone who's changed the world in some sort of way. Who would you choose?
Oh.
Always a tricky
Gosh,
one.
I really wish I'd read the questions that you sent me beforehand now, so I could get something really
Sometimes it's worse if you read the questions
super
beforehand.
clever.
You almost don't want to be too prepared.
Someone like Maya Angelou, I think when you read her story and where she came from, and I know Maya Angelou is a bit kind of like cliche, but the reason why I like her is because she's an amazing poet, but it's more about having that experience of having a horrific upbringing of nasty things happening, real abuse. And I compared a child sex abuse conference the other day, and I learned so much about what happens to survivors and how they carry this trauma around with them. And Maya Angelou, I think, carried her trauma around with her and yet still found love to help other people. So it's about having something awful that happens to you, rather than kind of going, "Oh, right, I hate the world because something awful happened to me." Kind of go, "Oh, something awful happened to me, so I'm going to try even harder to love and help others." And I think I find that quite inspirational. That's what I want to do.
I'd imagine you've used many curse words on stage, but what would you say is your favorite curse word and why?
I found myself recently going back to old favourites, and I've been going back to, and again, coming back to my mum. My mum used to say things like when she was really stressed when we were little and a bit like playing up and whatever, she'd go, "God, give me strength," yeah? And that's really weird because she didn't really have a faith. She didn't really go to church, you know what I mean? Even though we were packed off the church, they didn't go. And I found recently when I'm really stressed with my toddler saying Jesus a lot and almost becoming like an Irish mum. For the love of Jesus, it's just really powerful. And I think the other reason is because you can't say the F word when you've got a 4-year-old. You have to, you can't say the really bad swear words. So I've started going down the religious iconography swear words. Jesus, mother of cousin of Christ, that kind of thing.
If you ever get a chance to go away or on holiday, which is a nightmare in itself these days, as we know, post everything that's gone on in the last 2 years, what would you say is your favorite place or holiday destination?
Oh gosh, camping would be a good one. Camping would be great, I think. I like camping.
Next one, Angie. Who would you say is your favorite music artist? And what would you say is your favorite album?
I'm a bit weird because I don't really listen to music apart from Classic FM.
Is there maybe a favorite album maybe from your younger days?
Oh, well, Kate Bush. Oh gosh, I can't help it, but Kate Bush really does stuff to me. At the moment, she's in the chart. She's number one. you know, and because of the association with Stranger Things. And I must admit, and I watched, so Sarah does this amazing thing called An Evening Without, Sarah Louise, does this amazing show called An Evening Without Kate Bush, and I went to it last month, and it's a comedy reenactment of Kate Bush moments. It's just beautiful. And there's something about that opening to running up that hill that really takes me back to, I know exactly where I was, what I was doing, what I was thinking. I was like 17 years old in my bedroom at home, listening to Running Up That Hill and those feelings with it. And every time I hear that starting kind of drum beats to Running Up That Hill, I kind of feel like I'm transported back to being 17. It's an amazing album. In fact, all of Kate Bush's work is brilliant. So I'd go with Kate Bush.
Hounds of Love, isn't it? And then I think the synthesizer comes in with that do 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 do.
Yeah, it's such a powerful track.
It's a great song. I always like the Hounds of Love one. I thought that was a great track as well. What would you say is your great achievement to date? Greatest achievement to date?
God. I kind of bit me wants to say my son, but kind of like, I don't know. I used to think before pre-children and post-children, I feel like I had completely different brains. And I don't just mean on that kind of like, oh, I forget things every day now, which I do. Like putting my battery into my laptop. But before I had a child, I can remember being in full-time work and looking out at this mum who was playing with her child, who was probably about 3 or 4 years old, and me thinking, God, I look so easy. You know, people say, oh, it's so hard. And I just think, so easy, you know, but I do, you know, working full-time and, you know, running a creative arts organisation, that's real work. I'm a real feminist. That's what I do. Whereas these people with children, they're not really feminists, aren't they? Whereas I'm really, yeah, I'm thinking that I was like, what I was doing was the hard job. And then I had a child, and then you realise it's actually really, really tough on so many levels. And it's such a sensory experience. I find it quite overwhelming at times. But what I like about the reason why I'm so proud of my son is because he's so happy and confident in a way that other children are like really scared and really like don't want to meet your eyes, and like some children at my son's nursery who can give you a dirty look. They're only 4 years old. How have they learned to give a dirty look?
These kids
My son's teacher said
they're very clever today, these kids.
I know, it was like, I don't know how to do that. And my teacher said to me the other day, she said, the nursery teacher said, you can see where he's got his love and curiosity of life from. He's totally got it from you. You can see it in him. He's so happy. We're so pleased that he's in our class and that we get to spend time with him. We can see what you've done with him. And I burst into tears. Yeah, because that's the whole thing, isn't it? About how you affect another human being, and how I have worked with my son is that whole, I have to embody what I want, rather than saying do this and do that and don't do this and don't do that, which is not how I work at all, which is probably why it's going to be a nightmare when he goes to school. I have tried to embody, this is how you are in the world. You're helpful, you're kind, you do this, you say this, this is me doing this, so you see how to do it in the world. And so far it seems to be working, so I'm quite proud of that.
Angie, here's the final question now. Final question for today's Your Take. How do you wish to be remembered?
I think when I started Comedy on Referral, I saw it as my legacy project. And so I want to, the doing it in the community was really important for me. Because I said before, it was about kind of saying, I think that even if you've got no money, even if you're too scared to go to a workshop, even if I thought about going to a workshop, even if you think stand-up comedy isn't for you, because to be honest with you, it's still mostly middle-class people that get to be on the telly doing it and earning the big bucks. I wanted to make sure that this amazing thing that I designed, which is how to learn stand-up, which so far has worked for everyone, you know, I wanted to be remembered as someone who kind of didn't see that as just for some people, but for everyone. And that's why the fact that, you know, it's on the NHS and we're doing it in London with Rethink is really important. I want to help people with comedy, and I want to use the art form, which I love. I spend a long time working on and trying to get it as good as I can get it. I'm now, interestingly, more I'm more into helping other people with it now. Do you know what I mean? If you could say to me now, Angie, you can either spend the next 10 years on stage or the next 10 years teaching stand-up comedy to people in rundown areas in London who may well kill themselves if they don't have any therapeutic intervention, I would rather teach and help other people than be on stage. I'm not too bothered about it anymore. I like to be on stage, and I don't get out in the evenings much to do evening stage work. And because I'm with my child. But I love teaching. I love seeing other people get as excited about the writing and performing of comedy that I have in the last 15 years.
The 60 plus minutes over, I'm afraid, but thank you kindly for being a guest on today's Your Take. And to kind of sum it up, I think what's definitely come across is this huge kind of passion for life, but mainly for sort of helping people build their confidence or maybe pursue their own aspirations, like you've done yourself, with this love for creativity, this love to perform. And that's really shone through the interview. And, you know, kind of the whole point of Your Take is it is an in-depth kind of serious interview where we kind of try and get as much information out of the guest as possible about kind of their life and career, and almost joining the dots together. But what I've enjoyed most about today is there's been quite a lot of laughter and it's been fun. So I hope you've enjoyed today, and thank you kindly for taking part. And I wanted to end by asking you how we find out more about all your work you've done, how we maybe go to a live comedy gig, a stand-up gig, and where we can find you on the dreaded, as they say, social media.
I've got several websites, but my comedy education site is angiescomedycourses.com. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn's so boring. I can understand if you don't want to join me on there. Oh, it's dull, isn't it? I find it so hard to stay on there, and like
I used to be on it.
It's very boring, isn't it?
I used to be on it, and then I came off because I thought, I've never even had a career, so what do I need to promote? I've never really had a career job, so yeah. What's the point? Yeah. But yeah, I wish you all the very best with all your future endeavors, whatever you decide to do. More importantly, motherhood, and I hope your boy grows up to great things and keep smiling. And again, thanks for being a guest and sharing your life and all your experiences on today's Your Take.
Oh, thanks for having me, James. Cheers.